When I turned 18, my stepmom actually tried to make me start paying rent, on my birthday, no less. What she didn't know was that the house we all lived in was legally mine. I'd grown up there, living with my dad for as long as I can remember. My mom passed away when I was just a little kid, barely 4 years old, so it had always been just the two of us. The house itself belonged to my mom's parents, my grandparents on her side. After she died, my dad didn't date anyone seriously for a long time. Sure, when I was around 12, he'd occasionally go out for coffee or dinner with someone, but nothing ever came of it. While he was out, I'd stay with a babysitter. None of those women ever came around the house, and Dad didn't seem all that interested in getting close to anyone. But everything started shifting when I turned 14. By that time, both of my grandparents had passed away too, so it was just me and Dad living in that big old house. That's when he met Stephanie. One evening, he came into the living room with this weird nervous smile, like a teenager with a crush. "Sharon, sweetheart, there's someone I'd really like you to meet," he said. "This is Stephanie." Stephanie looked like she belonged in a magazine, tall, polished, perfectly done-up hair, flawless nails. But what really threw me were the two people standing behind her, her kids. "These are my children," Stephanie said smoothly, like she'd practiced the line in the mirror. "Alexander is a freshman in college, and this is Julie. She's 16. Alexander barely acknowledged me, too busy with his phone to care. Julie, though, looked me dead in the eye. Later that day, she cornered me in the kitchen and laid it all out. "Let's get one thing straight," she said, folding her arms like she owned the place. "Just because our parents are dating doesn't mean we're friends. Don't get any ideas." From there, everything happened fast. Within 6 months, Dad and Stephanie were married, and her whole crew moved into the house. It was wild how our big, roomy home suddenly felt like it had shrunk overnight. Alexander claimed the guest room, we turned the study into a bedroom for Julie, and Stephanie's belongings just seemed to take over, like they multiplied the second they came through the door. Sharing the bathroom turned into a full-on daily battle. Stephanie had her endless beauty routines, and Julie hogged the mirror for selfies like it was her job. I started setting my alarm an hour earlier just to grab a quick shower before school. But I didn't say a word. Not when I saw the way Dad smiled at Stephanie like she hung the moon. Not when he started whistling while he made breakfast, or when he finally began coming home on time just to sit down for dinner. For the first time since Mom passed, he looked truly happy. So I stayed quiet. Then came the promotion. Dad walked in one night, grinning from ear to ear, tie loose, practically bursting with pride. "I got it," he said over dinner. "Regional sales director. Can you believe it?" Stephanie wasted no time jumping into her plans, talking about buying a new car and remodeling the kitchen, but I couldn't stop thinking about one word he'd said: travel. Turned out that promotion meant he'd be gone. A lot. Sometimes for weeks, even a whole month at a time. The very first time Dad left on a business trip, something shifted. The second his car disappeared down the road, Stephanie turned to me with a completely different look, cold, firm. "Sharon," she said in this sharp, no-nonsense tone, "we need to set some ground rules for while your father's away." Those rules turned out to be a full-on list of chores and strict new curfews. I had to be home by 4:30 sharp, no ifs, ands, or buts. Didn't matter if I had school events or study groups. "But I've got volleyball practice on Thursdays," I told her, trying to reason. "Well, then you'll have to quit," she replied like it was no big deal. "Somebody needs to help with the cooking and cleaning around here." Those first few days were brutal. I'd race home from school, drop my backpack, and instantly get hit with a stream of orders. "Mop the floors, Sharon. These windows are disgusting, Sharon. Chop vegetables for dinner, Sharon." Meanwhile, Julie would be sprawled out on the couch, glued to her phone, laughing at texts from whichever guy she was flirting with that week. Alexander wasn't around much, but when he was, he'd just dump his dirty dishes in the sink and leave his laundry wherever it landed. One evening, as I scrubbed pots while Julie blasted TikToks on full volume, I finally snapped. Why doesn't Julie help with anything? I asked, genuinely fed up. Stephanie didn't even look up from her magazine. Julie has college prep to focus on. She can't afford to waste time on chores. But she's just what? Stephanie asked, her voice icy. I looked over at Julie, who was now filming herself dancing to some trending song, not a textbook in sight. Nothing, I muttered, turning back to the sink. And the worst part? It wasn't even all the housework or the constant double standards, it was how completely fake Stephanie became the minute Dad was around. As soon as he called or came back from a trip, she'd switch it up. Suddenly, she was exhausted and overwhelmed, acting like she'd been single-handedly running the house. Oh, honey, you wouldn't believe how tough it's been, she'd sigh dramatically when he walked in the door. I've been handling everything on my own. And Dad, bless his heart, would fall for it every time. He'd kiss her on the forehead and hand her some expensive gift from his trip, designer purses, fancy perfume, jewelry that looked like it belonged in a glass case. You're amazing, he'd tell her. I don't know what I'd do without you. I'd just stand there, hands still raw from scrubbing, a pile of homework waiting for me, watching the whole show unfold. Sometimes Julie would shoot me a smug little smile over her phone. But I didn't say anything. What was the point? Dad was finally happy, successful, and in love, and I wasn't about to ruin that. The years dragged on, and before I knew it, I was a senior in high school. Alexander had graduated college a couple of years earlier, but he was still camped out at home, claiming he was just waiting for the right opportunity. In reality, that translated to endless hours of video games and half-hearted interviews that never led anywhere. Julie was in her third year at the local college, which, lucky me, meant she was still around too, clinging to her throne in the bathroom and continuing her lifelong tradition of not doing a single chore. When my 18th birthday rolled around that spring, I wasn't expecting a big celebration. Stephanie had already made it clear that nothing extravagant was happening. We'll just have a small family dinner, she said one day, not even bothering to glance up from her phone. No need to blow money on a big party. I did my best not to think back to Julie's 18th, how Stephanie had rented out a whole venue, hired a caterer, booked a DJ, and invited what felt like half the town. She'd spent weeks planning every last detail, making sure it was perfect. But me? A modest dinner at home was apparently all I deserved. At least Dad was there for the meal. He hugged me tight that night and whispered, "Sorry, princess. Duty calls. We'll celebrate the right way when I get back." He left for another business trip the next morning. After that, I threw myself into all the usual senior year stuff, college applications, ordering my cap and gown, trying to make it to graduation in one piece. Everything felt normal, until that dinner about a week after Dad left. It was just me, Stephanie, Alexander, and Julie sitting around the table. I was mindlessly pushing my peas around my plate, half listening to Julie drone on about the latest drama with her boyfriend, when Stephanie suddenly cleared her throat. "Sharon," she said, clasping her hands together like she was about to deliver a sermon, "we need to have a serious discussion." For a second, I thought maybe she wanted to talk about college, maybe she was finally showing some interest in my future. I sat up a little straighter. "Now that you're 18, she continued, her voice oozing fake sweetness, "you're legally an adult. And adults contribute. So, starting next month, you'll need to pay rent. I think $500 a month is reasonable." I just about choked on my food. Alexander chuckled and gave me a few unhelpful pats on the back, clearly entertained. When I looked around the table, Alexander and Julie were both smirking, like they'd been waiting for this moment. "And what exactly happens if I can't pay?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. Stephanie's smile stretched wider. "Well then, I guess you'll have to find another place to live. We can't afford to support freeloaders." I stared down at my now cold plate, her words ringing in my ears. After all the years of being treated like a maid, this was how I was being repaid? Something inside me snapped. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice low but steady. Alexander, who's been out of college for 2 years and spends all day gaming, doesn't owe a dime? Julie, who's never lifted a finger and hogs the bathroom like she pays the mortgage, she's off the hook too. But me, you expect me to pay? Stephanie calmly dabbed the corners of her mouth with a napkin like we were having some civilized brunch. I've decided my children don't need to pay rent while they're getting on their feet, she said smoothly. And then, something shifted in me. Maybe it was the years of keeping quiet, or maybe I'd just finally had enough. I felt a slow, unexpected smile creep across my face, one that made Stephanie pause, just for a second. Well, here's the thing, I said, leaning back in my chair. I won't be paying rent. Because this house? It's mine. The silence hit hard. For a second, no one moved. Then Alexander burst out laughing. Julie let out a high-pitched giggle. Even Stephanie laughed, though hers sounded brittle, uncertain. What are you talking about? She asked, still chuckling but clearly unsure. I kept my eyes locked on hers. My grandparents, Mom's parents, they put the house in my name before they passed. That shut them up. The laughter died off quick as they realized I wasn't joking. Stephanie's face went from amused to confused to something a lot closer to panic. That's ridiculous, she said, snatching up her phone. I'm calling your father. She jabbed at the screen with her perfectly manicured nails, putting the call on speaker. The ring seemed to echo through the room. Hello? Dad's voice crackled through. Christian, Stephanie said tightly. Sharon is telling some strange stories about the house. She claims it belongs to her. That's not true, right? There was a long pause, so long it felt like time froze. Christian, she pressed, her voice rising. Finally, he cleared his throat. Actually, her grandparents did put the house in Sharon's name before they passed. Stephanie's jaw dropped. You didn't think to mention this to me? She shrieked. I didn't think it mattered, Dad replied, his voice small. It never came up. Didn't think it mattered? Stephanie's face was rapidly turning a shade of red I'd never seen before. You didn't think it was relevant that your teenage daughter owns the house we live in? Before Dad could say another word, she slammed the phone down, ending the call. The kitchen was dead silent except for the quiet hum of the fridge. Alexander and Julie looked like they'd just seen a ghost. Stephanie sat frozen, breathing hard, trying to reel herself back in. When she finally spoke again, her voice was overly bright, but I could hear the tremble underneath. Well, Stephanie said after a pause, forcing out a laugh that sounded more like a cough, this has all just been one big misunderstanding. Obviously, you don't need to pay rent, Sharon. Let's just put this whole conversation behind us, all right? I didn't say a word. I had no appetite left anyway. I stood up from the table and headed straight for the stairs, my footsteps the only reply. As I reached the second floor, I could hear them whispering below, Stephanie's hushed but frantic voice mixing with Alexander and Julie's anxious murmurs. By 6 the next morning, I was already awake, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, trying to process how everything had flipped in just a single evening. Around 7, I heard the usual sounds, Stephanie in the kitchen, making her morning coffee. I was about to head down for breakfast when I caught her voice from the living room, low but sharp, clearly on the phone. Christian, you've got to do something about this, she said, her tone tight. Your daughter can't just waltz around acting like she runs the place. We need to convince her to move out. I froze mid-step on the staircase. I know it's technically her house, she went on, the frustration in her voice barely contained. But she's making everything tense. She doesn't belong here anymore. She's becoming a problem. There was a beat of silence, then Dad's voice came through the phone, muffled but audible. I could tell from the tone that he was hesitant. But Stephanie, it is her house. I can't exactly force her to leave. Stephanie switched into her saccharine, manipulative tone. Nobody's saying we force her out, Christian. We just guide her. Encourage her. What about those colleges she applied to? The ones out of state? Maybe you could gently nudge her to go. Tell her it's the best thing for her, help her find her independence. And then came the part that made my stomach knot up. Maybe you're right, Dad said. I'll talk to her. Maybe getting out of the house for school would be best, for everyone. I waited until she ended the call, then walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. I kept my face neutral, my steps steady. I grabbed a bowl and poured some cereal, acting like I hadn't just heard her plan to ship me off. Alexander and Julie wandered in not long after, both avoiding eye contact. Stephanie came in last, still clutching her phone. Good morning, everyone, she said in her best Stepford wife voice, like last night's explosion had never happened. We sat in silence, just the sound of crunching cereal and the occasional clink of spoon against bowl. And then, without even looking up, I said casually, "Oh, by the way, starting next month, everyone here will need to start paying rent." Stephanie froze, her toast hovering halfway to her mouth. Alexander's phone slipped right into his cereal. Julie dropped her spoon with a loud clang. "I'm sorry, what?" Stephanie asked, barely above a whisper. "Rent," I repeated, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. $500 each sounds fair. I mean, we're all adults here, right? And adults cover their own expenses. Stephanie's face turned from pale to red in a flash. She started coughing, like the coffee had gone down the wrong way. You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm completely serious." "But we're family," she said, trying to pull herself together. "Family doesn't charge family rent. That's just not how this works." I stirred my cereal calmly. Funny, coming from someone who just yesterday insisted I pay $500 a month. In my own house. She went quiet for a second, then carefully set down her coffee cup with a clink. "That was different," she said stiffly. "I was trying to teach you responsibility. Financial literacy. You know, prepare you for the real world." I couldn't help it, I let out a small laugh. Financial literacy? Coming from someone who's been living rent-free in someone else's house for 4 years? Alexander sat up straighter, clearly irritated. "Listen here." But I cut him off. "No, you listen. You graduated 2 years ago. You don't work. You sit around all day playing video games and eating food I help pay for with my part-time job. If anyone needs a lesson in the real world, it's you." Then I turned to Julie. "And you, when's the last time you did your own laundry? Or cleaned up after yourself?" Stephanie's voice rose sharply. "How dare you speak to us like this? After everything I've done for this family." I tilted my head. "What exactly have you done, Stephanie? Made me clean the house top to bottom while your kids sat on their asses? Tried to squeeze rent out of me? Oh, and don't forget this morning, conspiring with Dad to get me to move out." Her eyes went wide. You were listening?" "I heard every word," I said, pushing my bowl aside. "And maybe you're right. Maybe it is time for some changes. So here they are, either start paying your share of rent, or find somewhere else to live. Your choice." Her face flushed crimson. "This is revenge. You're just a bitter little girl, jealous of my children." Julie rolled her eyes. "You expect us to pay rent? What are you gonna do, kick us out? You ungrateful brat." Alexander shot to his feet, knocking over his chair. "We took you in. Welcomed you into our family." I stayed calm, even as they all raised their voices. "Your family?" I said quietly. "This house belonged to my grandparents. You moved in here. Remember?" Stephanie stood up too, trembling with rage. "You'll regret this. Alexander, Julie, go pack. We're leaving." I watched silently as they stormed off, stomping up the stairs like sulking toddlers. Stephanie paused at the doorway, turning back with a venomous glare. "You'll pay for this," she hissed. "Your father is going to hear about every bit of it." I sat there at the kitchen table, picking at my soggy cereal while drawers slammed upstairs and angry voices echoed down the hall. Within an hour, they were packed, or at least enough to make a dramatic exit. I heard them stomping around, shoving bags, muttering under their breath. Then the front door flung open, and just like that, they were gone. Stephanie didn't even bother to shut the door behind her. She stormed out like a soap opera villain, with Alexander and Julie trailing behind like moody backup dancers. The silence that settled over the house was unreal. For the first time in years, it felt still. I wandered from room to room, straightening up the mess they'd left in their rush. It was weird, almost like walking through someone else's house after the party ended and everyone went home. I kept trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. It wasn't until late afternoon that my phone finally rang. Dad's name lit up the screen. I braced myself and answered. "Hello? What the hell is going on?" Dad's voice came crashing through the speaker. I had to pull the phone back from my ear. "Stephanie just called me, completely hysterical. How could you be so heartless?" And that was it. The dam inside me broke. After years of swallowing my feelings, biting my tongue, and trying to be the good daughter, I was done. "Cruel?" I snapped. "You want to talk about cruel, Dad? Where was all this outrage when Stephanie tried to charge me rent for living in the house that belongs to me? You didn't think that was a little twisted?" There was a pause. I could almost hear him blinking on the other end. "Wait, what are you talking about? Stephanie never." "Don't," I said, cutting him off. My voice shook, but I held my ground. "Don't pretend you didn't know. I heard your conversation with her this morning. I was on the stairs. I heard everything, how she wanted me gone, and how you agreed to push me out." Another long silence. You could have heard a pin drop. "Sharon, honey, listen, you don't understand," he stumbled over his words, then tried to recover. But his tone hardened. "You're tearing this family apart. Stephanie says she's going to divorce me over this. Is that what you want? To break up this family?" I sank into the living room couch, the same one where Julie used to lounge for hours while I scrubbed floors and folded her laundry. "She wants to divorce you unless I apologize?" I asked. "Apologize for what? Standing up for myself? Owning my own home?" "She's my wife," Dad said, voice cracking a little. "She says either you make this right, say sorry to her and the kids, drop this whole rent thing, or she's leaving me. You're going to let this destroy my marriage?" I glanced around the room at the photos on the walls, mostly of Stephanie's family now. There was still one little picture of my mom tucked in the corner, almost hidden behind a fake plant. "I'm not apologizing," I said calmly. "Not for this." The line went dead. He'd hung up. Graduation came and went in a blur. The ceremony was beautiful, but the empty seats in the audience hit me like a punch to the gut. My best friend Virginia's parents cheered for me, took a ton of photos, and even brought me along to their family dinner afterward. They didn't mention the absence of my family, but their hugs felt warmer, a little tighter than usual. In the days that followed, I busied myself with college stuff, sorting acceptance letters, figuring out finances, and making plans. The house was quiet, but for the first time, it felt like my own. Peaceful, even. Until one afternoon, a familiar car pulled into the driveway. I saw it through the front window, Dad's car. He got out first, followed by Stephanie, Alexander, and Julie. They were dressed like they were heading into court, serious clothes, stiff posture, all of them wearing the same tight-lipped expression. I didn't wait for them to knock. I opened the door and stood in the frame, arms crossed. "Sharon," Dad began, his tone clipped. Stephanie stood just behind him, nodding along like she was coaching him from backstage. "We're here to resolve this." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I'm willing to forgive everything that's happened," he said slowly, as if reading from a script. "We can all move back in and return to normal. But you need to apologize to Stephanie and her kids. And obviously, the rent idea is off the table." I looked at each of them, Dad's forced calm, Stephanie's smug little smile, the usual eye-roll attitude from Alexander and Julie. And suddenly I could see it all so clearly, the years of chores, the way they treated me like a burden, and how Dad had slowly turned into someone I didn't recognize. "No," I said. Dad's jaw tightened. "Then you leave me no choice. If you can't make peace with this family, if you can't be a part of it, then I'm done. I'm leaving. And I'm cutting ties with you. Is that really what you want?" I didn't flinch. "That's your decision to make. But don't pretend like this is some surprise. You've been choosing them over me for years." Stephanie let out a dramatic gasp, like she was auditioning for a soap opera. "You little witch. You've always been jealous of my children, always stirring up drama, trying to come between us and your father." I held up my phone. "One more word, and I'm calling the police. Harassment's still a thing, you know." That shut her up fast. Dad turned away and started gathering up the last of his things, boxes, clothes, a few books he'd left behind. No one spoke. The silence was thicker than ever as he made his trips back and forth from the house to the car. He didn't say goodbye. None of them did. They just left, quiet, angry, and carrying exactly what they brought in, themselves. That was 3 months ago. I'm writing this now from my dorm room at Northwestern. It's over 1,000 miles from that house, and honestly, it feels like a world away. I ended up renting out the place through Anderson Real Estate. A sweet little family with 2 young daughters moved in. They take care of it well, and the rent they pay more than covers my college expenses. I've got enough to live comfortably, study hard, and not worry about money. It's peaceful here. And more than anything, it finally feels like my life. I still hear the occasional update about Dad through people we used to know, mutual friends, old neighbors, the ones who don't quite know how to bring him up around me. He's renting a 3-bedroom place on the other side of town these days. Still has the same job, still signs emails with a polished title and pulls in a solid paycheck. Stephanie? She finally got her dream renovation, granite countertops, shiny stainless steel appliances, just not in my kitchen. Someone else's house, someone else's dime. Alexander apparently landed a job, not sure doing what, but last I heard, he's still living at home. Julie dropped out of college a while back, but she's rebranded herself as a fashion influencer. She's got a blog now, posts outfit of the day pictures and inspirational quotes like she invented resilience. They're out there, doing their thing. And I'm here, doing mine. Every now and then, when sleep won't come, I'll scroll through old photos, the ones from way back, before Mom died. Back when Dad's smile was real, when it showed in his eyes. Back when family meant something that didn't come with conditions or ultimatums. I wonder if he ever looks at those pictures too. If he ever stops and thinks about me. If he regrets the choices he made, if he misses me the way I sometimes find myself missing him. Maybe one day, things will change. Maybe he'll wake up and realize what he walked away from. Maybe we'll find our way back to something that feels like a father and daughter again. Or maybe that chapter's closed for good. Either way, I've come to understand something I never quite believed before, something I had to live through to really know. I'm stronger than I ever imagined I could be.